Yeah, sorry for the delay. Thank you for being patient. This is an important day for the Belleville School District. At this time, I'd like to take a moment of silent thought and reflection. This call is meeting to order. Meeting posted an announcement in accordance with Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. Mr. Clark, please call poll for present members.
Ms. Dolan?
Here.
Mr. Rivera? Mrs. Torres?
Present.
Mr. Valon?
Present.
Mr. Zangari?
Present.
Mrs. Lombardi?
Here.
Mr. Cooper?
Here.
You have quorum.
We now move on to superintendent reports. We don't have any tonight. So now we move on to item 4, items remarked by committee reports and board members. Ms. Torres?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Dolan?
I only have one thing. I attended School 10 on January 22nd. They had a presentation for park testing for the parents. Mrs. Vallada presented the presentation on the park testing to the parents along with Mrs. Ravel and some of her teachers. The presentation was very informative and well received by the parents, who were very attentive and asked a lot of questions that were all answered by Mrs. Ravel and her teachers. I was very happy to see so many parents attend this meeting. At the same time, a dance was held for the children, where the home and school parents and teachers supervised. After the meeting, the parents joined the dance and the event was enjoyed by all. Attending this meeting brought back a lot of memories for me because my daughter attended School 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dolan. Mr. Valon?
No report at this time, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. Zagari?
No report this evening, Mr. President. However, I would like to thank Educational Advantage for the service they provided us with the superintendent search. They've done an exceptional job, and I feel very confident in them and what they have brought to us, and would recommend them to any district in the state.
Thank you, Mr. Zagari. Mrs. Lombardi?
No report this evening.
Thank you. I'd actually like to thank everybody for coming tonight. As I indicated before, this is a very important night for our district, for us to move forward. I'd like to also thank Educational Advantage. They did a great job giving us qualified candidates. All candidates were qualified and well suited for this district. However, the board tonight has chosen one to fill this spot in our district that we think would fit well with our educators, administrators, and school district. And thank you again for supporting this district, because we all need to move forward and we have a lot of work ahead of us. And again, I'd like to say thank you. We now move on to public participation. May I get a motion for open public participation?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. At this time, remarks regarding agenda items and issues that are relevant to the education system only and for this agenda only. You're going to have 5 minutes. We're going to cap it at 30 minutes. And Mr. Jeff Mattingly, please come to the podium, state your name, address, group affiliation.
I defer at this time.
Mr.
You gotta chime in? I didn't see the chime in.
Okay. Mrs. Georgianne Polite, please state your name, address, group affiliation.
If we're not going to receive the superintendent first, then there's no issue to speak on if that is the only thing that we're allowed to speak on.
If you have any questions for...
We don't even know who he is.
No, we have to.
No.
So how are we going to have any questions for him?
Would you like to...
I'll tell you
I
what.
mean, it is kind of out of order, according to what was written on the paper here. I'm confused.
If I may make a suggestion, why don't I read aloud the first resolution that will be considered, and then perhaps that will encourage some comment. Whereas the Belleville Board of Education desires to employ Dr. Richard D. Tomko as its superintendent of schools, and whereas Dr. Tomko has agreed to serve as superintendent of schools, and whereas Mr. Joseph S. Zara, interim executive county superintendent for Essex County, has reviewed and given the written approval of the State of New Jersey Department of Education to the contract of employment between the Belleville Board of Education and Dr. Tomko, now therefore be it resolved that the Belleville Board of Education hereby appoints Dr. Richard D. Tomko as its superintendent of schools effective February 15, 2015 through June 30, 2018 at an annual salary of $167,500 prorated for the 2014-2015 school year and subject to the remaining terms and conditions of the contract of employment, including merit increases as provided for by code. Be it further resolved that the board president and board secretary are authorized and directed to execute the aforesaid contract of employment on behalf of the Board of Education. So perhaps having heard that resolution, that will enable people who signed up to speak.
Jeff Madam,
I still defer at this time, thank you.
Ms. Georgianne Platt.
Georgianne Polite, Stevens Street, Belleville, New Jersey. Good evening, everyone. And I also would like to congratulate Mr. Tomko for coming to our school district. I do have some questions regarding the contract, i.e. the salary, the merit pay, what it is, what are the benchmarks. In light of some of our past superintendents and their salaries and perks as they were so called, I'm concerned as a parent, as a citizen, as a taxpayer, that they are in line with dealing with the situation such that it is, and that those pertinent items, once they are given to us, then they can be addressed. It concerns me that we're going out of order in a meeting and not given the proper information in order to even address Mr. Tomko's selection, and that is my concern. Thank you.
Perhaps I can answer your question. So the salary is established based largely on the size of the school district. Salaries of superintendents, as you probably know, are now regulated by the Department of Education, and for a school district of this size, the maximum salary, and I'll tell you that universally superintendents are given the maximum salary in the range now. The maximum salary is $165,000, but there's an additional $2,500 as per the Department of Education, because this district has a high school. If it had no high school, it would be $165,000. This is a 3-year contract, and a 3-year contract is by statute the minimum contract that a school district may give to a superintendent. They are all 3, 4, or 5-year contracts. This one is actually 3.5 years because it starts in February, so these contract years must by statute be measured from July 1 through June 30th. So there are 3 full school years in this contract. There are no salary increases. This is a flat rate contract. And that is the situation with all superintendent contracts now, because since you're not allowed to pay more than $167,500, you can't give any raises because you can't pay more than $167,500 basic compensation. merit increase was provided by the Department of Education as a consequence of having capped salary and prohibited raises. Here's how it works. The maximum merit pay that may be awarded to any superintendent, it's the same in every district in New Jersey, is 14.99%. That doesn't mean that the superintendent gets 14.99%. It doesn't mean you have to give them 14.99%. That's the maximum that a superintendent can be given. Here's how this works. In any year in which the board decides to do so, and some years it may and some years it may not, it will set merit goals for the superintendent. There must be 3 quantitative merit goals and 2 qualitative merit goals. This all comes from statute and code. None of this is original to Belleville. And there is a breakdown of how much of that 14.99% may be awarded for each of those goals if the board decides to do so. So once those goals, let's take a year, and this, for Dr. Tomko, this is a process that would begin with the first full year, not between now and June, but rather the 15-16 school year, if that's what the board decides to do. So the way this works is the board develops goals, and once those goals are developed, and most boards develop them mutually with the superintendent, once those goals are developed, they are then given to the executive county superintendent, who must approve them. So once those goals are developed and approved, they become the superintendent's goals for the year. At the end of the year, the board evaluates whether the superintendent met each of those goals or not. And if, hypothetically, the board decided that the superintendent achieved a goal 100% and that goal was worth 2.5% merit, then the board would presumably decide that the superintendent should get 2.5% merit for having met that goal. If in another case they decided that the superintendent didn't meet the goal at all, then there would be no merit. Whatever the board decides has to be given then to the Department of Education through the executive county superintendent, who has to approve what the board decides. So the board isn't permitted to pay any money until they go through that entire process and the county superintendent approves it. And what I just described is the process in every single district in New Jersey. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Bill Malone?
I'll also defer.
Mr. Frantantoni?
Good evening, board members and administrators. We've been embarrassed by what's gone on in Belleville, not only the last year, but I think for the last 6 or 7 years. Years ago, we had our superintendent, Dr. Joe Saccone, served many years, and we had a great system. And then we went on this series of superintendents and assistant superintendents, just about all of them who left early, left us in a mess. And it's been embarrassing, to say the least. More importantly, it's been extremely costly on our taxpayers, and more important than that, it's been a disgrace that we've deprived our children of a quality education. And that, I think everybody who served on that board, past and present, should be embarrassed and apologize to the public for this. Now, we're embarrassed because we have the state appoint a state monitor to us. I'm concerned about this contract, and Mr. Edelstein has just briefly addressed, but I've got quite a few of the past contracts, and it's not only the dollar amount of the base salary, it's all the other things that we don't know, but very generous perks, the vacation, the personal days, excused absences, doctorate compensation, medical, dental, prescription, membership fees in organizations, mileage, sick leave, severance pays, and all that. In some cases, our past one, we paid severance pay, good dollars, to people who performed incompetently. That's a disgrace in itself. So, first, I would like to know, do it after I sit down, if the whole contract, the details of the whole contract can be read to the public so that they know exactly, not now and not that we have to go over it later on, like I and others have had to do. So tonight we know, the public knows all the details of every penny and every perk that's being given out at our expense, because we pay the bills. And it's hurting the system. You look at the foreclosures in Belleville, you look at the houses for sale, and a good portion of that, many of the reasons are because of this school system here. Now, in all due respect, if that's the proper wording to you in this here, Dr. Tomko, and once again, we brandize the internet and technology all the time. So I'm going to speak on some of the information that I received from technology on the internet. Hopefully it's accurate. Dr. Tomko, what I read was the superintendent of the Elmwood Park school system. Two consecutive years of deficit they had there, and they had a point of state monitor who happened to be Mr. Egan there. Mr. Egan left a few months back, and they've appointed a new monitor in Elmwood Park. So they're still under a monitor. The deficit in proportion, their school system was about the half the size or less of our school system. So in proportion, it appeared to be a much bigger deficit. So I don't know why he didn't stay to clean up the mess in Elmwood Park. He was there when it occurred. I think he should stay there. I don't know the reasons for leaving. Also, there's some other things in his resume. I think the superintendent of the school system our size, 4,900, is a full-time job. A full-time job. Not only during the day, but it takes some head work at night and on weekends. And you may be involved in other things that you have to show up for after the normal workday and all that. According to his resume, the good Dr. Tomko is also an adjunct professor at Bergen County Community College, at Manhattan College. He's also a managing partner of his own firm, a consulting firm that consults for school districts, private education centers, and municipalities. That in itself appears to me to be a full-time job. You need somebody to take care of Belleville full-time. I'm asking you. Also, he's been looking for another job. About 9 months ago, he was one of 4 finalists to apply for a superintendent job in Mount Vernon, New York. So, you know, we've had so much bad luck with prior ones, and hopefully, if he's appointed tonight, I hope to do a good job. But this is not what you ask publicly through the newspaper and through these meetings for input from the citizens of this town. I think we should get somebody who didn't have the deficit in his town. Someone who performed greatly, who can show you, look at this is what I did. Look how great this system was that I came from. Or if he came from another business, look how great I was. Look what I've accomplished and all that. So I beg you to consider, I mean, the way I understand it is not going to take effect next week and all, so maybe you reconsider, you want to look further, maybe you'll table this tonight if you consider everything I said. And like I said, if you give the public the courtesy of reading all the clauses in the contract so we can know tonight. Thank you.
Sure. After the contract is approved, assuming it's approved, tomorrow it'll be available to the public, like every other superintendent contract in New Jersey is available.
Well, why can't they're gonna vote on it tonight, why can't the public know what they're voting on?
Public does know what they're voting on.
We don't
You
know
may
all
not
the
be
details of the,
satisfied.
all you said is the salary.
You may not be satisfied, but that doesn't mean the public isn't satisfied.
Public doesn't know the details.
Dr. Tomko, would you like to add anything to that or comment?
I'd love to add something to that, that'd be great.
Yeah. Everybody, this is Dr. Tomko.
All right, thank you. I appreciate what you said, sir. And again, I know there's some, it's difficult. You guys are in a deficit, and my job will be to help you get out of that deficit. I think one thing that's not fair, though, is that part of that resume was read, but there's a whole other part of it that we missed. All the things that I did do in Elmwood Park, and I did in Denellen before that, and in private schools before that. So I think that if we're going to tell the story, we should tell the entire story. And I think that's something that if you did Google everything, you'd see the whole picture. So in Elmwood Park, again, I was there for 12 years. When I was an assistant superintendent, the CAFR report, which is a report that Belleville had last week, or last meeting, which talked about all the deficiencies in the financial status. When I was assistant superintendent here, that CAFR report reported a deficit in district. So I inherited that deficit. The first thing I did initially when I became superintendent of schools was made $1 million in cuts to try to offset that deficit. We also took away courtesy busing. We did a lot of things that hadn't been done there in many years to try to get our financial stability. Before we were appointed a monitor gets people nervous, and I understand that, but there's a set category of things that have to happen in order to have a monitor. Before that, usually districts have managers, and we had a manager for a year in Elmwood Park to try to get out of the deficit ourselves. We were extremely close. We put an action plan together ourselves before Mr. Egan even got there. Okay, so again, our problem was I needed to convince the state that we needed a loan, because Elmwood Park today is still $11 million under state funded. So under adequacy. So what we did was we got out of that deficit. We have a surplus. We enhanced all our facilities. Our English score is up 93%. We had the highest graduation increase last year. So we're doing a lot of great things there. I want to come to Belleville. Belleville's a great opportunity for me and for this town. I said to the board when I was in the interviews, I believe this is a renaissance here. There's a lot of great things that can happen here. I know that the teachers are looking for a leader, and I'm that leader. So hopefully tonight, you can look at the entire picture instead of just picking at certain things. Some of the past things that I was a finalist. I was actually the finalist. And that was a large district, sir. It was about 10,000 students. That was a change of life for us. My wife Jamie's here, and we are dedicated. I know more than any superintendent in the state, and I'll say it, what the dedication is to be a superintendent. I've missed many of my own children's dances, their plays and things like that to be at things when I was a superintendent I needed to be at. So I know the dedication, I know the commitment. So again, all I need is a chance to prove it, and hope tonight I get that chance to show you that I'm definitely a candidate. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I have a motion to close public session.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We now move to item 6, resolutions. May I have a motion on A, personnel?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Clark, please call vote.
Mrs. Dolan?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera is absent. Mrs. Torres?
Yes.
Mr. Valon?
No.
Mr. Zangari?
Yes.
Mrs. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mr. Kubler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion? Congratulations.
Thank you very much. All in now, thank you.
May I have a motion for e-finance?
So moved. Second.
Or any discussion? Mr. Clark, please call vote.
Mrs. Dolan?
Yes, with the exceptions.
Mrs. Torres?
Yes, with exceptions.
Mr. Valon?
No.
Mr. Zangari?
Yes.
Mrs. Lombardi?
Yes.
Mr. Kubler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Everybody have a good evening, thank you for coming. And again, good things to come in Belleville. And again, congratulations to Dr. Tom.